We missed you.
Yeah, I overslept.
Oh.
I took a nap and overslept.
Okay. Well,
I guess that means you weren't here last time.
yeah.
Because the last time you heard, you said there were probably times that you will just watch it online.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I kind of heard that was last week.
Well, I couldn't figure out how to watch it online last week.
Well, I know I messed up. In fact,
There were parts you couldn't.
In fact, you are all. So what happens is when I play a video in here, I put the video so that it's nicer on the online, and I mute it. Well, I forgot to unmute it both times. Both times.
So there's a portion
talking.
you don't get any.
Well, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That was my fault. I mean, if you went to watch the video,
I tried to watch it because there was so much. It didn't seem like we went over that much, but when I got home, it's like my head was spinning, and it's like I wanted to watch it again in a couple of days, and it kept giving me those parts that were, I guess, that he had muted, and
yeah. Well, that was not.
so I said, okay, well, you have to redo lesson one more time, just so.
No. Well, you ready?
Yes.
Okay, like we're on, like right on time, and Connie's not coming because she's.
I think she's at her mom's. I
Okay.
think she chose sometime toward the last week to.
Yeah, I
She was
thought.
going to go over the holiday weekend, but plans changed. So
Okay.
no, because she wasn't at church. So
Okay, so before I turn the page to chapter 2,
Okay.
you've had a week to digest the track meet that was chapter 1. Is there anything you want to ask?
Yeah, can you do it again?
Woo!
I just asked him that. Can you reload it where it's unmuted?
I know because
It's already on there.
that's how I
Okay.
recorded it. Yeah, so.
Okay.
Well, you will be glad to know that we slow down from here on out, which is
I
good.
thought last week was slow, but apparently
No, last week was a track meet. So, here's your question for today. And I had fun making this slide, by the way.
Where are we?
And it's the question that he started out the book with, or this chapter with, which, we are fascinated with the supernatural and with superhumans. You're not?
No,
Really?
I'm not. I'm
Not?
so sorry. I am not.
So you don't get into those movies at all?
I don't.
Really? Okay, so you're not a sci-fi person.
No,
Okay.
I
Well,
am not.
supernatural.
I love the ability to talk to my Lord and listen and dream.
Ah.
Oh my gosh. When I dream and he answers my prayers, I am just so happy. And I never, for years, he answered my prayers through dreams. And I was afraid to tell anybody
I think it's awesome.
about that.
Yeah.
But I have not been afraid since I talked to Pastor Gary about it. And he goes, "Girl,
People
this
would
is
love
what he
that.
wants to do."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No. I'll go a little story. When I took the class, the spiritual class from ADRM, which was Walk in the Spirit.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, very, very awesome class. And it's strange. The one thing that I pulled out of that is, I need to pray that when I sleep in the Spirit.
Right.
Okay.
Oh,
And so-
'cause that is,
And so
that's the answers.
what happens is, like, when you sit there and, like, for me, if I was chewing on something, trying to figure something out, or whatever it may be, and it's like, before you go to bed, Lord, just, let me sleep in the Spirit, give me down. Well, for me, that's when I wake up in the morning, it's like, oh, okay, I got it. Yeah, and that's all.
So I want one as a question, but
Yeah.
I'm just gonna ask or say this first. But he he doesn't respond to each of us in the same way. Where you're getting your answers in a dream, because in my past, I have nightmares more than I don't have nightmares. And so
Oh.
I don't want to go into if he would clear them up, and I've asked over and over again, I would love to be able to sleep through the night. But I find it fascinating and awesome that you can do that. My question up there is, who is the we? Believers or anybody?
You know, in some ways, I'm going to say everybody, but I'm also, especially for this example and the two verses that I'm going to show you here in a little bit, it's almost like more non-believers, okay?
So I'm going to answer this question with what I know, and that is because pagan practices, Wicca, witchcraft, whether you're a white witch, a black witch, whatever, these things are so common in our society today in general,
Yeah.
and that there are New Age stores everywhere.
Oh, sure.
It doesn't matter where you're going. And so they help make it such a fascinating thing. And yet what pagan believers are doing is often opening a door that they have no business opening. Thinking that they're going to help somebody.
Well, I mean,
So
we're gonna talk in a big way. I got 3 little videos to show you tonight, and it's like, you know, this idea that, hey, listen, there is a spiritual unseen realm. There is our realm here, and in that spiritual realm, there are good guys and there are bad guys. You know what I mean?
That's like the game, the Ouija board.
Oh, yeah.
Is something people and kids. I don't even know if they still sell that game.
Yeah.
But
they
Oh,
do.
yeah.
it's just it's a nasty thing to try to work with.
Well, now I've got to tell you, I grabbed all the little images, and like I love every one of these series. I mean, I got to tell you, during the pandemic, the second run movie
Yeah.
theater was open, and we went and saw all the Harry
the
Potter,
Harry Potter
and I reread all the books. Now it's interesting because a lot of Christians went after that as witchcraft. Well, what's interesting, she's a Christian,
Right.
and she didn't want to tell anybody that she was a Christian because then they could have figured out how she was going to end the series. Because if you look at how she ends the series, it is very much a very Christian thing where it's like love overcomes.
Has she
Yeah.
ended the series?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah.
I don't.
So-
I
so-
mean, I've seen them, but I.
So I hate to say it, I've watched all of these.
What's the one to the right? Is that the
We got
to the right of
X-Files.
Harry Potter?
That's the Avengers series. Lord of the Rings. Oh, I love Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah.
X-Men, not so much. Oh, Melody
Twilight.
loves Twilight. Star Wars. Stranger Things. Interesting. I think it's a Netflix series. Heiser wrote a Bible study on Stranger Things. He goes finding the gospel in Stranger Things, and Stranger Things is whacked out. I mean, it's a weird one. But anyways, I think the answer to this question is the same answer to why non-believers are always searching for something to fill the hole in their soul.
Yeah, because they don't realize that Jesus Christ is the answer.
And the verses were in your book, but Ecclesiastes, that the great verse 3, which goes, there's a time for all things.
Living and dying and
Yeah, but he has also set eternity in their hearts. So get that. I think we all have eternity in our hearts. We know that this can't be it. So yet that man will not find out the works which God has done from the beginning even to the end. So it's like, yeah, we got eternity in our hearts, but then the people that have their hearts hardened don't realize what God's up to, which is amazing. So then we've talked through this verse before in Romans, where basically there's no excuse. I'm not going to read the whole. Well, I am going to read the whole thing. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them. You get that? There's a hole that's God wants to fill. But we're like, no, we want to fill other stuff in there. For God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his external powers, and his divine nature have been clearly seen. Imagine that. Atheists want to sit there and say, well, God. Well, God's sitting there going, yeah, really? Look around. I don't want to use the phrase hold my beer, because I don't think God would say that. He might.
The wine?
Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
Being understood through what he has been made, so that they're without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculation, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God, and this is really where it comes down to, for the image in the form of corruptible man and of birds and of four-footed animals and crawling creatures. So instead of looking around going, whoa, look at the God that made this, or like, not so much, I'll fill it up with other stuff, I'll play fantasy football or whatever.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So,
Sorry.
we're gonna break some myths. Demons do not have horns and tails, and angels, except for the cherubim, do not have wings. In fact, if you look at when angels come, they're usually terrifying. So here's the first video, and I'm going to make sure that we get this right online and offline. Remind me to turn the sound back on. But this is the Bible Project. If you remember when we went through the story and you had the little writing thing for each book. Okay. This is them again, but this is they've got I think it's a 6-part series that we'll watch all of them eventually on the unseen realm. So this is an introduction to spiritual beings.
If you pick up the Bible, you don't have to read far before you meet the main character, God.
Yeah, he appears in the Bible's first sentence. And then later on page 1, you meet the humans.
And there you have it. The two main players in the Bible, God and humans on the stage of our world.
Well, not quite. In the Bible, there's actually a way bigger cast of characters than just humans and God.
Like who?
I mean the figures called the Elohim in the Hebrew scriptures. Angels, the Satan, demons, they're all over the story.
Oh, right. Spiritual beings. To be honest, I've never really known what to do with them. It's all kind of weird.
And unfortunately, almost all of our modern conceptions about these beings are based on serious misunderstandings.
All right, so let's talk about spiritual beings in the story of the Bible.
So first thing we have to do is reorient ourselves to how the ancient biblical authors saw the world. On pages 1 and 2 of Genesis, God brings order to a watery wilderness, separating the skies above from the land below.
Right, this is Earth, where we live. And then there's the heavens high above, which they saw as God's domain.
But in the Bible, these spaces are not separate. They overlap. And in fact, the Garden of Eden is described throughout the Bible as a high mountain garden where heaven and earth are one.
Cool.
So that's the world. Now it needs some creatures. God first creates and appoints the sun, moon, and stars to rule the day and night.
You mean the giant flaming gas balls in the sky?
Well, that's how you think about them. But the biblical authors, like all ancient people, saw them as heavenly creatures that are glorious, shining bright, and high above.
Which is strange. I don't think of stars as creatures.
Well, you don't. But for the biblical authors, the stars formed their categories for thinking and talking about a spiritual reality that exists alongside ours. And it's a different kind of reality, just like the sky is different from the land. And it's populated with creatures that have different kinds of bodies, shiny spiritual bodies.
Okay, so almost all ancient cultures thought of the stars as divine beings, including the ancient Israelites.
But the biblical authors make clear that these beings are not God. Rather, they're images of God. Their glory and high status is a reflection of the Creator's glory and status, and they exist to serve His purposes.
So the stars symbolize beings who are like God's heavenly staff team.
Right. Now let's go back, because after God appointed the heavenly host, He also appointed another type of creature.
The humans.
Yeah, in Hebrew they're called Adam. which sounds like the Hebrew word for dirt because that's what they're made of.
So, glorious rulers above and hairy sapiens below.
But then comes the great twist. God tells the lowly humans that they are to rule all of creation. He invites them to rise above their dirty origins and share in God's glory as his partners.
So God wants to rule the world through humans and not the spiritual beings.
Exactly. This is how the poet of Psalm 8 understood the stories of Genesis. He looked up at the stars and says,
What is humanity that you consider him? You made him lower than the spiritual beings, but crowned him with glory and divine majesty.
this is humanity's high calling, to rule creation in the love and power of God.
Very cool.
But not everyone's happy. We're introduced to a spiritual being who doesn't want humans to rule, so he tricks them into thinking that they can get divine power on their own terms.
They're deceived, and they take the opportunity.
So they're banished from the Eden Mountain, exiled to wander the earth and return to the dust.
This snake is bad news.
Yeah, and as you read on, you discover that he's part of a spiritual rebellion that follows the humans outside of Eden, and things get worse from here.
The humans still desire to rule, so they start a new project.
Yes, in the Bible, this is called Babylon. It's the anti-Eden, where human and spiritual rebels join together to elevate themselves back to their former glory. And so, with all that in mind, we can now appreciate the full cast of characters that we meet in the biblical story.
God, humans, and all of the spiritual beings.
Exactly. And so here's a preview of what we're going to explore. We'll learn more about God's heavenly staff team called the Divine Council. Then we'll talk about angels and cherubim, key figures in the spiritual realm. And then one particular angel called the Angel of the Lord. We'll also look at the spiritual rebels in the Bible, connected with the Satan and demons. And finally, we'll see how this whole story leads to Jesus, the one who overcomes evil, reunites heaven and earth, so that a new humanity can partner with God.
By the fact that the guy has this little stick neck and this little round thing where the woman actually has a face with hair, but the guy doesn't. I mean, is that supposed to mean something? It's just strange.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know how they ended.
I know. I'm trying to notice everything, and that seemed to be different.
Oh yeah. So
Very different.
yeah.
Okay, we'll just go with it. They have artistic
They have
over
that.
there, whatever.
Right.
So it's very interesting. Heiser is one of the script consultants on this stuff. So that's one of the reasons he uses it. That's one of the reasons it matches up very good. But this idea that God has two families at this point, a spiritual and us, our human family.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of that Garden of Eden being where they were both together at the beginning, and then they got separated, you're like, ooh, okay, wow. And when you think about what's going on in God's redemption plan, it's basically to bring those families back together. I was reading an interesting book. Well, first of all, let me say this. We're going through two things today, which is, the gods are real, which we did a lot of it last week, but we're going to hit it in a little bit slower fashion. And then the structure of God's hierarchy in the Divine Council. All right, now, let me give you an off-the-cuff thing. I started reading a book, and I don't even remember the name of it. But it's based on an old Puritan book, and one of the things that the guy was talking about in the second chapter was the book's sort of subject is to try to understand the heart of Jesus, not just Jesus the person, and God and all that, but the real heart of him, and all based off of, hey, I'm lowly of spirit, basically this compassion thing. I can't, and this idea of, my yoke is easy, take on my yoke.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, what he was talking about is when Jesus would go through, and you see this compassionate Jesus, and he's healing the leopards, he's touching people and healing them, sight and all that stuff. He is not doing something that is miraculous to bring somebody forward in their lives. He's trying to basically take the distortion out of their lives, the sickness, the death,
Yeah.
and that's what it was supposed to be. So he's not healing them, he's putting them back to their original state of what they should be. And you're like, oh, that's different. And then when he gets, because they said you can't take just the compassionate Jesus without taking the Jesus that gets a little mad every once in a while.
Mhm.
When he's getting mad when people like being in the distortion, when the Pharisees and everything like being in the distortion. So this idea that, to bring it back into today, where that Garden of Eden was sort of the headquarters, and we'll talk about that a lot more next week, of Jesus, or of God, basically his spiritual home and family and his earthly home and family. That's where they came together, and basically Adam and Eve were to go and be fruitful and multiply and rule over that earthly kingdom with everything being together. That's the way it was supposed to be. Got messed up and now it's separated. So it's very, this idea of getting it through your head that, okay, there's a spiritual realm and a hierarchy. There is an earthly realm that we're in, and they're supposed to be together. They're supposed to be one family. So the gods are real. We went through a lot of this last week, but I'm going to go through a couple of verses just to hit the point home again, because this is sort of the foundation of this. And so Psalm 89, and I did turn the volume back on. Good. Okay. You didn't remind me. The heavens will praise your wonder, O Lord, your faithfulness also in the what? The assemblies of the holy ones. And the holy ones, those are just ancient Israelites, right? No. For who is in the sky compares to you, the Lord. Now, I don't know about you, but I do not see ancient Israelites flying in the sky. Now, mind you, today we are in airplanes, but there are not a lot of holy ones on Delta. Yeah. All right? Whom among the sons of the mighty is like the Lord, a God greatly feared in the council of his holy ones, and awesome above all those around him. You get this idea, it's like
There's other folks.
there's other things. Yes, there's other folks. And we'll learn, and you see it on your thing, the little chart there that we'll get to. Some of those other ones in the assembly of the holy ones aren't so good anymore,
Right.
They
bailed.
So they really did. Actually, that's a pretty Baal, the worship of Baal and the Baal side. They definitely bailed. All right. So Daniel, a river of fire was flowing and came out from before him. This is the heavenly scene. Thousands upon thousands were attending him. The myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat and the books were open. Whoa. So, you get this idea that there is a heavenly throne room with myriads of myriads, thousands of thousands. There's a lot of spiritual beings up there.
I'm sure we went over this when we did Daniel,
Mhm.
Agents of Babylon. But the thousands upon thousands were attending him, that I got. And myriads upon myriads were standing before him. Those are not people standing before him waiting to be judged, because that hasn't come yet, right?
No.
These are those who have already died and gone to heaven? No.
Well, so
They're waiting.
So
Aren't they?
Waiting
this Daniel 7 has we'll go down a rabbit trail for just a little bit, but we'll come back. Trust me. Daniel 7 and Revelations 4, and also Ezekiel, have a lot in common. And I'm going to go to Revelation 4 for a little bit, where we get pretty much the exact same scene, but we get a little bit more detail with the four beasts and all that, and standing in front of the throne. And you got the 24 elders sitting there and all that stuff. But so you've got sort of the same type of vision of this courtroom, or court, however you want to say it. Well, the myriads of myriads and the thousands are both angels, and most likely the church, because the 24 elders that you get in Revelation 4 sort of lead to that idea that you have the 12 tribes and you have the 12 elders for the church there as part of the council. So that thousands upon thousands, myriads upon myriads seems to be when the family is back together again. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We'll come back to.
That wasn't much of a rabbit trail.
Well, it wasn't too much of one. So we have been through this one before. God has taken his place in the divine council in the midst of the gods. He holds judgment. And we have gone through the Elohim part pretty good. We're going to watch now another video here on the Elohims. The thing to keep in mind is Elohim is translated as God. It's also translated as a couple other things. But Elohim is more about, it's a word more describing the person's, or the spirit in this case's location, than it is about their role or function. Okay? So the original word, I'll read this so I make sure that I say it. And this comes directly from the book. The original Hebrew word translated gods is Elohim. Many of us have thought of Elohim for so long as one singular sense, and that is of God, as one of the names of God the Father. In the Old Testament, God, when it's translated God, it's always Elohim. When it's translated Lord, it's always Yahweh. Okay? But Elohim's also translated, like we showed that graph last week, into a lot of different things. So it's going to be hard to think of it because we've grown up with Elohim, if you knew what Elohim means, of thinking of that's God. Or, but the word refers to any inhabitant of the unseen spiritual world. It's a word that describes a disembodied spiritual, and that's down here, spiritual being. Their home, if you think of humans as being on earth, physical, Elohims are spiritual. Okay? Because here's what happens. We get, in Genesis 1, Elohim is talking about God himself. In Deuteronomy, Elohim is translated as a demon. All right? Hey, in 1 Samuel, when you got basically the witch of Endor that Saul went to bring Samuel back from the dead so he could talk to him, well, he is called an Elohim in that story. Okay? So Elohim is a spiritual, an inhabitant of the unseen spiritual realm or world. Get it? Got it?
When you first said location, it's more about location than it is about, my words, job description.
Yes.
By location, you mean, and I thought you meant as, because I might be a little confused, but I thought last week you talked about the Tower of Babel and God saying we've got to give them confuse them and give them different languages, send them to different, and they kind of form different countries. So I thought you mentioned something at that point about the fact that each group that God decided is going to speak French or whatever it is, this, that, or the other. I thought that you mentioned that each one of those countries then had a
Elohim.
Yeah. Is that the same? That's not different though, location.
Well, welcome to the confusion of the Hebrew language.
Yay!
And this happens in somewhat reverse when you think of Greek to English. Think of the word love. In love,
4 different forms.
yeah.
Yes.
So Greek has 4 different words.
Yeah.
We have 1. Okay. In this particular case, it's the other way around. We're using the word, or the Hebrew is using the word Elohim, and it has a vast array of translations into English language. So the Tower of Babel, or depending on how you want to say it, Babel. I've heard this one before. Gary and I have been having a lot of fun with pronunciations, and do you use the Hebrew, the Greek, or the sort of English of it, and then nobody can agree on what the actual Hebrew is, because Hebrew, you've got Hebrew today, Hebrew then, and Hebrew what they think it was, but nobody really knows because they're all dead. So I mean, you get the translation. But Tower of Babel, sorry, Tower of Babel. Just like they were talking about in the video, God in His council came down and said, "Hey, we've got
We got a problem.
we got a problem here."
Houston, we have a problem.
And so God separated them and gave them their own language according to the number of Elohims in the council.
Wow.
Read that again.
According to the number of Elohims in the council, which has it got to be lots?
70.
I'm sorry,
70.
Wow.
70 in the
70
council.
gods in his council.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
How many? Now, we'll get there, okay? And I'm trying not to throw too much out so that your eyes and ears don't start bleeding.
They already are. 70
How-
Elohims in the council. That's
How
fascinating.
How many elders were there appointed in the wilderness with Moses? 70.
Right.
How many?
Number of perfection.
How many members of the Sanhedrin are there?
70. He does that all the time. He
Yeah.
does 40 and 70 and 40 and
Those
70
numbers
and
that
40 and
mean,
70.
Or the day, 3 days that Jesus was dead and
Oh,
then
yeah.
rose.
Yeah.
Again, these are all numbers, which, back to your original question that you posted that's on here, why are we so fascinated? So you have those people who are non-believers who are fascinated with numerology, with all of that. And I would truly believe at some point there might be some connections, but depends on how far you take it. But
Well, I mean,
numbers are important.
Think about it. I remember when I was in high school, and it was like, oh, astrology. I was born
Yes.
under the star of Libra, so I can read in the newspaper what my day's going to be like. Well, think about it. They're looking up to the stars.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Those stars, in the context of an ancient Israelite or Hebrew person, those were gods. Okay? Now, you notice they're not, they thought of them as gods. Is a star a god? No. But they thought of it as a god. And it's interesting, I'm going to go down just a little bit of a rabbit trail for a second. I just really listened to all of the Chronicles of Narnia. And so I don't remember what book it's in. But in one of the things, C.S. Lewis has the kids, they're I think it's the Prince of Caspian, where they're going to the end of the earth, and they sit down and they're talking to this guy, and he's like, "Yeah, I used to be a star." It's like, "You were a star." It's like,
Yeah.
and
And then you were famous?
well, he used to be one of the gods,
Yeah.
because that's what they thought of them. The sons of gods were stars. And they end the thing where all the stars came back together, and it was all representative of basically bringing the family back together in Narnia. So, anyways.
Yeah, but the skies,
Mm-hmm.
it's like like an address book.
Oh.
I mean, people who are sailing on the seas, I mean, they look to.
Right.
So it's so much more than just us looking up and seeing stars. It actually serves a purpose
Oh, sure,
for
sure.
many people down here on Earth.
Oh, and we're fascinated with the stars. I mean,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
okay, so
Sky.
yeah, oh yeah. So here is the next video. This is on the Elohim.
When most people think about the story of the Bible, they think of a story about God and humans.
But remember, we learned that there's a whole other cast of characters that appears throughout the Bible and plays a really important role.
Oh, right, spiritual beings, angels, demons, and the like.
Right. And in the Bible, they inhabit the heavenly realm, which is parallel to our earthly reality and actually overlaps with it.
Now, all of these spiritual beings have their own unique characteristics.
But here's what's fascinating. The biblical authors have one word that can refer to all the inhabitants of the spiritual realm. In Old Testament Hebrew, the word is Elohim, and in New Testament Greek, it's Theos. But here's the thing. This word gets translated in lots of different ways depending on which being is referred to. Angels, gods with a lowercase g, or even God with a capital G.
Wait, so one word can refer to any of these beings?
Yeah, it's because Elohim is a category title. It can designate any spiritual being that belongs to the heavenly realm.
Okay, a title, not a name. Like the word mom.
Yeah, right. The word mom can refer to lots of really different kinds of people, but they all share in common the same role in a family. And then let's say a group of brothers and sisters are talking and one says, hey, it's mom's birthday. They're using the title like it's a name.
But it would be clear that they're referring not to any mom, but their mom.
Yes, and the same goes for the biblical authors. They called their God Yahweh, which is the name revealed to Moses, but they also sometimes refer to him with the category title Elohim, using it like a name, because they all know who they're referring to.
Okay, but don't the biblical authors think that Yahweh's in a class of his own, not like any other?
They do, which is why they say things like Yahweh is the Elohim of Elohim. That is, the chief Elohim among all the others. Or they'll say, there's no Elohim beside Yahweh, meaning no other spiritual being compares to him because only he is the ruler and creator of all things.
Okay, I'm following, but I thought the Bible taught monotheism, which means there's just one God.
Well, the biblical authors are claiming that among all of the spiritual beings out there, only one is the source and creator of all things, including the Elohim. That's biblical monotheism, that one Elohim, Yahweh, is above all other Elohim, that is, the other spiritual beings. Now, with all that said, we are ready to learn more about who these other Elohim are and how they fit into the biblical story.
You just watched a video on Elohim. That is.
There we go. All right. Makes sense?
You know, that
Sorta.
little dude that they use in the center, he's reminding me of a spaceship waiting to take off. I mean, it's shaped just...
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's, my mind thinks of these things, but it does look like it.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
I know.
does
It's
look
not
like it, yeah.
important, but...
Okay, so I think we have beaten the point pretty good that there are spiritual beings. Those spiritual beings are vast in their differences, and we'll talk about that here in just a second, but they're all under this idea of Elohim, all right? Now, I'll introduce it. Well, no, I won't introduce yet. So I'm going to go through now a couple of different stories. Now, some of the stories were on your outline for last week. They're all, well, they're not. I didn't put your verses down here now, but that's okay. These are stories that sort of prove the point of a council. That's what we're going through right now. Is we've got plenty of instances in the Bible where God brings a bunch of people together, spiritual people, beings together, to make a decision, and then God makes the decision. Okay? So let's go through some of these interesting stories. Now, Ahab is the one that we sort of went through a little bit last week.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. This was the one thing that didn't work.
1 Kings 22.
Yeah. Well, where are you? Hold on a second. There you go. No, that's not it. 1 Kings 22, right?
Yeah.
All good things. Okay, so Ahab, bad king.
Very
All right.
bad.
Very bad king. Very, very bad
Very
king.
bad.
And we love the story where he basically is going down to Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, and they want to go and fight together because we got two separate nations. We got the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and they want to get together to go and fight. All right, and Ahab has his prophets. And all of his prophets say, yeah, man, go down and do it, man. Go for it. You're going to do great. And Jehoshaphat is like, well, no, I'm not sure. Isn't there a man of God here? Yeah, that tells you he already knew, what was going on. And you get this funny thing. Yeah, there's Micah, but I don't really like Micah
Yeah, because he doesn't tell him what
because
he
he
wants to hear.
doesn't tell him what he wants to hear. Exactly. So Micah comes and he's like, yeah, everything will be fine. He's like, no, I told you not to lie to me. And he's like, okay. And he tells him what's going on. Well, what happens is we get that story, that earthly story going on. But then we get this glimpse of heaven. And what verse is that? Okay, so Micah comes and he gives this story. And it says, when Micah came and he said, go up and you will succeed. And he says, how many times have you said this? Tell me the truth, what the Lord says. So we get down here. And I saw all Israel scattered on the mountain like sheep. Like sheep, there was no shepherd. And the Lord said, they have no masters. Let each of them return to the house in peace. So then we get this idea of this heavenly council scene. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all of the host of heaven standing by him, and on his right hand and on his left hand. And the Lord said, and now imagine this, the Lord's sitting there, he's got his heavenly host here, he said, who will entice Ahab to go up and fall in Ramoth Gilead? And one said this, and while the other said that. Then a spirit came forward. A spirit came forward, not a person. A spirit came forward and said, I will go and entice him. Okay, so who will entice? I will go, I will entice him. And the Lord said, how? And he said, I will go out and be a deceiving spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. Then you will, and the Lord basically said, great idea. Go do it. And then the Lord decreed it. Okay? So, paraphrasing there.
The verse 19, saw the Lord sitting on the throne, and the host of heaven standing by him on his right and his left. Then we get verse 19, and I'm sorry. Then we get verse 21, and the spirit came forward.
Yeah.
The spirit that came forward was not from that group of.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So you get if you can imagine this scene, God's in heaven. He's probably on his throne, and he's got all his council sitting, standing on his right hand, standing on his left hand, and the Lord's sitting there going, "Man, I got a problem, and I just don't know what to do about it."
No, he does not say that.
No, he doesn't say that. But I mean, what he's saying is he's got his divine counsel. He wants them involved. He's listening to their ideas. All right. And so the spirit comes up and he says, I'll go down and entice him. And the Lord's like, well, you will now. Now, how are you going to do that? What are you going to do? He said, well, I'll go and I'll be a deceiving spirit in his prophet's mouth. Oh, Lord's like, I like that idea. Go ahead and do that. Now, mind you, the Lord knew what was going to happen. You know what I mean? But he wants
other people to
So
involve themselves with the process.
now, we're going to get to this, but I'll put this out, and I'm not going to answer it, and I don't want you to answer it out loud.
Okay.
But why does the Lord want this? And why does it matter for us.
I didn't.
Okay.
What's him?
So we got that one. You get this idea, though. Here is a council meeting going on, and the Lord's saying, "Hey, what should we do?" Now, mind you, if it was a
board of directors.
if it was a stupid idea, the Lord's going to be like, "Hey, just go sit down." You know what I mean? But this was good, so he did it. Because I'll say this one. Slight road trip, but I'll come back really quick. It always bothered me because the Lord doesn't lie.
No.
And you're putting a deceiving spirit in something. Isn't that lying? No, it's not. All right, so good
That's
with that.
Ahab.
You got that's Ahab. Now the one you all know about, Job. All right, you have all heard this story. If you haven't, you have not been around me because I love this story. Okay. So we get this wonder, and I'm not even going to look at the scripture. I mean, it's up here, but that's all right. But you got this idea that we get introduced to Job, and then all of a sudden we're up in heaven, and we're having a report. He brings all of his people together. God, the Lord brings all of his people together, because you hear this. Where is it? Now, there was a day when the sons of God, sons of Elohim, all right, came to present themselves before the Lord. And the Satan, and I'm putting the word the Satan in there because that's adversary, also came. And the Lord said to Satan, "Hey, what you been doing, man?" And he's like, "I've been going up and down looking at everything. Hey, have you thought about my guy, Job? He's a great guy, man. He's a great guy." And Satan's like, "Yeah, he's not that great. Let me test him a little bit. All right, go ahead." And we get these two scenes. That's a council scene. I mean, think about it. It's bizarre to us, but you have all of these Elohims, the sons of God, coming together to make a report to the Lord. And Satan's with them. Doesn't that bother you? But no, because God's in control. God's in control. Satan couldn't have done anything without God's approval. But it gives you this idea that there's a meeting going on. There may be one going on right now.
Don't you think so?
I think so. The Lord's probably like, "Hey guys, what do you think we should do about this pandemic?" Or who do you think's going to win the election in November? I mean,
Well, look at Trump with the Israel and the Arabs.
oh yeah.
I'm like, okay, time has come.
Oh, listen. I mean, now,
I'm sorry.
I'm going to go down that rabbit trail for just a little bit, but the stage is set. The actors are all there.
In line.
Yeah. So, we go with the rapture comes, then the tribulation, and then Jesus comes, his second coming at the end. It's close.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Since
Yeah.
have you heard anything about some quote vaccine for COVID that's going to include something going under the skin when they give you the vaccine?
Oh, listen. It's the mark of
I
the
ain't going there.
I
boy.
have no. Well, I'd like to know because if I've heard it, I have no idea how to figure it out.
Okay, so Mark of the Beast has been one of those things that have been talked about forever. Well, at least for the last
I got
2,000
that
years.
part.
So, I remember back when Reagan was in office and they talked about basically, chips and things and all that. And he's like, that's Mark of the Beast stuff. Listen, if you hear that, hey, we're gonna do a,
I know. I see the verses before me.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean that everything we hear is not true.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to discern it with Scripture. And listen, I'll say it this way. Say we are completely wrong about the church being raptured and we're in the midst of the tribulation right now.
I don't want to hear that.
I don't I don't believe that
No.
for 1 minute. But say that's the case, and say next week you get a peace accord that basically splits the Temple Mount, where and now the Jews start building the third temple, and you're like,
Yeah.
uh-oh, that's Daniel stuff, that's 70 week stuff. Say we're completely wrong about the rapture. Well, I got to tell you this. We are believers in Christ.
Yes.
We will know
Yes.
what to do and what not to do. Because, I mean, if we're true believers, the Lord's going to watch over us, you know.
This is the only place where I can ask questions like that.
Oh, that's right.
Because I don't have a TV, I don't get a newspaper, and the idea of one of my Monday Bible study ladies, her two sons in Washington, work for Hutchinson's Research Center, and they have been working since the beginning of COVID on a vaccine for it.
Yeah.
And she's heard nothing. They haven't. Oh, guess what? We're getting close. Nothing. So I had a feeling. I was like, so why do people want to start stupid rumors like that?
Oh, well.
I don't know, because people, unfortunately, some of them are going to believe that.
Oh, without a doubt. All
I
right.
was just curious if you guys have heard it.
So let's go to I think our last example, which is Daniel. And you remember the when Nebuchadnezzar basically
Yes.
was
Went to
turned
the
into
forest.
went and was to a beast. Well, what I want to bring out here is I think it's here we go. So I want to go down to verse 23. And so basically, O king, live forever. He sits there and says, hey, this is all of mine. And then all of a sudden, in that, the king saw an angelic watcher. Okay? A holy one descending from heaven, saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, yet leave the stump and the roots. And then you get, all of a sudden, O king, this is decreed from the Most High, which comes from my Lord the king. So you get this idea that the whole thing, and it goes on to tell the story of he got the angelic watchers voice came down from heaven, said, boom, buddy, it's time for you to go chew on some grass. All right? But you get this idea of an angelic watcher being decreed and told to do something from the God among high. You got a spiritual being here basically doing the will of God. So, why do we say all that? Well, there is structure in the unseen realm. God is highly structured, all right, in what he does in his program. So if you look, and these are very broad groups, and I'm going to tell you about the chapter I printed out for you here in a second. But Yahweh is the Godhead, okay? Underneath him is the sons of God. The sons of God are sort of the divine council, all right? Then you've got angels. Well, angels is Malkan, and I'm sure I'm just destroying the Hebrew, but that means messenger. So it just means messenger. So what you have is you have a hierarchy here of God, sons of God, and then angels. Now, why is this important to us? What does the Bible say in Hebrews? It says, Jesus came down and was made a little lower than the angels to become human. So that must mean we're down here at this particular
It's real
point.
little below thing.
Yeah. Now, what happens in Psalm 82? It talks about the gods messing up. All right? When they messed up, and you get a full description of that in Deuteronomy 32, but it goes on and gives it to you in sort of a summary fashion in Psalm 82. They messed up in running the nations. God's mad at them for what they've done, and he's telling them they will die like men. Okay? Then Jesus comes down in here, and he says we're going to be adopted into his family, and we will be made sons of God. Paul talks about when he's talking to the Corinthians and they're sitting there suing each other and all that, he says, don't you understand? You will judge angels. You will be above angels. What's happening is we're becoming born again. We're inherited and adopted into God's family, his spiritual family. When he comes down and we're fully glorified and the rapture happens and all of the tribulation is done and Jesus comes and reestablishes his kingdom, we now move from down here to take the place of the sons of God in the spiritual realm. So when the spiritual realm and the physical realm come together, those failed angels that are not angels, but the failed Elohim, sons of God, that are in the spiritual realm right now, they're gone, and we get put into their place in the family order. Now, doesn't salvation seem a whole lot more?
Closer?
Yeah. Now, so you get that? It makes sense?
Yeah.
What I gave you here is incredibly difficult to read.
Oh, great.
So read it at your own peril. I'm going to give you a very, very brief synopsis of it,
Okay.
but there is a lot of this is from Heiser's book on angels. And the one thing I looked for and I couldn't find, and I wish, and one of these days I'll actually try to make a chart. He did a very good job of explaining it, but it is academic to the nth degree. So it's a difficult read. But when we look at the heavenly bureaucracy, you look at things, the terms of what people are talking about into sort of three different categories, if you want to call it that. But we have terms that describe the nature of a spiritual being, what the member of the heavenly host are or are like. That's nature. Then we get terms in the Bible that talk about status or hierarchy, the hierarchy rank of a member of the heavenly host, which with respect to God and each other. Okay, so status or hierarchy, nature, and then function, what the members of the heavenly host do. Because I will bet you, I'll be willing to bet you, that if you went to anybody and said, tell me what the spiritual beings are, or tell me what the spiritual world is like, who's out there? They'll say angels and demons. And they won't go much further than that. Okay? Because that's what we're taught. I mean, that's what we're taught. So that's no, flippant thing on it, but that's just what we're taught. But if you look at this now, and you look at the English words, because the document that I gave you gives you the Hebrew words, all right? But if you look at the English words, nature, spirit, heavenly ones, stars, holy ones, God's divine beings, all right? That's their nature. Their status or their hierarchy, assembly, council, congregation, assembly, assembled meeting, or court. That's hierarchy. And then function is like their job title. Angel, minister, watcher, host, mediator, cherubim, seraphim.
Wow.
Those are functions. Well, we hear about the functions. We think Michael, archangel, that's your spiritual being. Well, that's his function. All right? His hierarchy's over here, and then sort of the nature of what he does is over there. I wish I had a chart that did that. I don't.
Yeah, that big guy. One of those big dudes. Where would you put Michael?
Well, Michael, most likely his function is an archangel,
Yeah.
and he's also called a holy one,
Okay.
and no doubt
I
that
guess
he's a
not
member of
on
the council.
the lower realm of
No,
those.
no. I mean, his job was an archangel. All right, and we only know a couple of names. We know Michael and Gabriel
Yeah.
in the Bible. Now, there's Caleb that you get in some of the other writings, and there's other names of angels in the non-canon writings. All right, but in the canon, we've got just Michael and Gabriel.
So if he'd wanted us to know about all those others, he would have included them.
He would have told us.
in his-
Now we have plenty of hints. These are all terms that come
Yeah,
out of the
yeah.
Bible. We have plenty of hints,
Yeah.
but obviously that's not what's important,
No.
from God's standpoint.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so I didn't put my little button that told me there was a movie next. So now what we're going to do, we're going to watch one more video, and this is on the Divine Council. You're actually getting 3 of the 6 videos tonight. Are you excited?
For most of human history, people have believed in some kind of spiritual realm that exists alongside the world as we know it.
Right, and the biblical authors are no exception.
Yeah, for them, the spiritual realm is a different kind of realm than ours. And to highlight that difference, the Bible refers to God's space as the sky or the heavens.
Because the sky is really different from the land. It's above and beyond. And up there are shiny bodies that move around. I think of these as flaming gas balls.
But when the biblical authors looked up, the stars gave them a way to talk and think about spiritual beings. In the Bible, they're called the sons of God, or the rulers and authorities, or even sometimes the divine council.
So that sounds really important. What does the divine council do?
Well, they're introduced in Genesis chapter 1, where they're called the host of heaven, that is, the sun, moon, and stars. And there, they're also called signs, meaning that their power and status symbolizes and points to God's power and status.
Yeah, so in Genesis 1, God appoints them to rule over the day and night.
Exactly. And then later in the Bible, we're told that they were celebrating God's power and creativity when he created the world.
Like the cheering section of a game.
Yeah, right. There are also stories in the Bible where God invites the divine council to participate in making a decision. Like when they help decide how to bring down the corrupt Israelite King Ahab. Or in the book of Job, where they debate God's policy of rewarding people who do good.
So they're like God's staff team. But why does God need a team? If he's powerful enough to create the whole universe, he could surely rule it without any help.
Well, he doesn't need them. But apparently, the God of the Bible wants to share authority with others.
Oh, right. God shares his rule with human partners on Earth. And so, in the same way, there's a parallel story of God sharing his authority to rule with spiritual partners.
Yes, that is, until it all falls apart in a twin rebellion. So you have humans who want to rule on Earth on their own terms. So they start building their own nation using their own definitions of good and evil.
Yeah, the famous story of the building of Babylon.
But check this out. When biblical authors like Moses or Isaiah looked back at the origins of Babylon, they saw more than just a human rebellion, but also a spiritual rebellion.
What was this spiritual rebellion?
Well, there were members of the divine council who, like the humans, didn't want to represent God's authority anymore. They wanted to be God, and they rebelled. And so these created beings deceived humans into worshiping them instead of the Creator. And so Babylon becomes the biblical image for the combined human and spiritual rebellion.
And so God scatters the people from Babylon into different nations.
And in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses says, this is when God also scattered the rebels of the divine council with them.
So the nations are handed over to spiritual rulers.
Yes, and this is why when the biblical prophets look out at the violent empires of their day, they see 2 dimensions to all the chaos and injustice. Human rebels who are being corrupted by the worship of spiritual rebels, the idol gods of money, sex, and military power.
Yeah, when humans give their allegiance to these powers, it leads to a world like ours.
Right, and the best example of this is the story of the Exodus, where we're told that the Egyptian genocide of the Israelites was inspired by Pharaoh and by the gods of Egypt.
That's really intense.
But it's not the end of the story. When God rescued the Israelites from Egypt and its gods, he invited them to become his covenant partners and learn a different way of ruling the world.
And they agree to it, but in the end, they don't honor the partnership. They give their allegiance to other gods.
And so this leads to their exile in Babylon, where they become slaves once again to a foreign nation and their spiritual rulers, awaiting a new exodus into freedom. And this is where the story of Jesus picks up. He said he was here to rescue the world and take it back from the rebels.
Which rebels, the human ones or the spiritual ones?
Exactly. For Jesus, it was all connected. When he marched into Jerusalem for Passover, he was announcing the ultimate exodus. He was there to confront and overcome all rebel powers and authorities, and he did it by giving up his life.
So this is what the Apostle Paul meant when he said that Jesus disarmed the powers and authorities, triumphing over them by the cross.
Yes, Jesus condemned our evil by allowing the rebels to unleash all their hate and evil on him. But then he overcame it with the power of his love and resurrection life. And then Jesus told his followers that all authority in heaven and earth now belongs to him.
Now, the ultimate human and divine partner. This is really good news.
Yeah, and it's why the apostles started inviting everyone to give their allegiance to the risen Jesus, to discover freedom and a new way to be human.
Now, while Jesus gained a decisive victory over the rebel powers, he didn't destroy them. They're still around, causing problems.
Yes, and in fact, they are the problem. The apostles said that humanity's real enemy is never another human. Rather, it's the spiritual powers that animate our cultural idols that inspire hatred, division, and violence.
So when I see people hurting other people, behind it is the divine council gone rogue. How do you deal with this kind of enemy?
Well, the Apostle Paul said we can resist by putting on the character traits of Jesus like armor, faithfulness, justice, and peace. And he said that our only weapon is the Word of God. That is, the biblical story of good news that Jesus has overcome all rebels with the divine power of his life and love.
For a few minutes.
Well, brings a whole new
You just watched a video on the divine council.
sort of meaning for the spiritual warfare part of
Yeah.
it, doesn't it? Because, and it makes the depth of what Jesus did even more. Because Paul talks about it, where it's like, if the spiritual world, the evil part of the spiritual world, knew what Jesus was doing, they would have never killed him. Because, I mean, it's the ultimate sort of, to me, it's the ultimate sort of, aha, gotcha. Jesus gave up his life to
Slam them.
slam him. To absolutely slam him. So, and we're going to unpack this as we go on. But we're basically, you know, we talked about the two things today. The gods are real from a spiritual standpoint. The Elohims are real. And then this idea of the divine council. Why does it matter? I mean, what does it matter? What does it matter in my life today that there's a spiritual realm and that there's Elohims and that there's a divine council? Now, I'll give you three, and then you can chime in. You know, his heavenly family business, the spiritual realm, is a template for how he wants it to work for us. All right, so that's sort of important, you know, because trust me, there's people out there that I've had in different classes that are like, I don't want to know anything about heaven. I don't want to know anything about that. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. I want to know everything because that's where I'm going to spend my life, you know, the rest of eternity. So it's like, wouldn't you like to know what his plan is? And if we see his plan in the spiritual realm, we know eventually that's coming together. Now this one's interesting. God could have just predetermined every event to happen and we could be little robots and all of it would happen. But that's not what he does. That's not what he wants. We still have free will. Because if we didn't have free will, and if the spiritual beings didn't have free will, we wouldn't be like God, or we wouldn't be in the image of God. And also the place wouldn't be a wreck. So, and believe it or not, especially in today's world, in the Bible, the unseen world has structure, so does ours. Doesn't seem like it sometimes.
No.
But I like what they did at the end there, where they're basically sitting there saying that the fight, you see all these rioting, you see all these protests, you see, I mean, if you, I wish I could delete Facebook sometimes because you just are sick of seeing all of it. But the hatred that's coming from the people that is totally irrational when you listen to them, well, it's not a human thing.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual warfare battle going on and bleeding onto us.
So, number 2 is something that is a very big part of what we're going to be studying in systematic theology, because the statement says God could predetermine events, but we do have free will. Therefore, people think that we have no choice because he already knows, and he's already written the book, and beginning to end, it's closed. But that's not true.
Predestination,
Right.
foreknowledge.
That's the word I'm trying to come up with.
Foreknowledge, two different things. So God foreknows every possibility.
Right. I believe
Okay.
that.
And predestination is a very interesting subject. From a salvation standpoint, does God know basically who is going to accept and follow him and who's not? I think the answer to that is yes, he
Yes.
knows that. Now,
He's giving us all a chance.
yeah. Now, does that mean that someone was born to not follow God? I don't believe that.
He's created each of us in his image. Therefore, everybody
Yeah.
is created in his
For
image.
God so loved the world that he sent his
Yes.
only begotten Son.
Yes.
But at the same time, the predestination, when you get into that, which is a little bit different than the word predetermined, but we'll go with the predestination. That means that once we are saved, we are predestined for everything that comes from that.
Yeah. For all the good stuff.
Yeah, all the good stuff. So, but we have free will, and it is a great mystery because it is hard to wrap your mind around it. He knows everything. He
Is in control.
He's in control. Yet our prayers matter.
Yes.
Okay, our witness matters.
Matters. Yeah.
We're supposed to go and make disciples. Well, if we didn't go and make disciples, then again, if we go back to
People aren't
Romans,
gonna hear.
how would people hear? So it wraps your mind about it. But I think I'll end and let you guys talk. But to understand our destiny, we need to go back to the time when God's two families occupied the same space. We need to go back, and that's his plan. Is the new heavens and the new earth is really bringing back what the Garden of Eden should have been.
Yeah.
So questions. I mean that. I thought tonight would be easier.
It was a good class.
Well, it was only 2 topics.
It was a very good class.
But hopefully.
A party in here. I just came to grab a charger.
Oh, you don't have to worry about the Zoom, Lisa. Rachel's gonna help me with that, so.
Awesome.
Okay,
Sounds
but I
good.
do need help with the menu thing.
Yes, I've already talked to her
Okay,
about
sweetheart,
it. We're all
thank you.
good. We got it taken care of.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
All right.
I thought it was going to be easier, and I think it was. We slowed down a lot compared to last week as far as topics go.
Yeah.
I think I tried to give you the whole book in last week, but questions, any comments? Does it make a difference?
I have to wait absolutely, and we've only done 2 lessons, but I'd like to go back, rewrite my notes, reread, and then I probably will have questions next week.
Well, I can tell you that I had, this was an enlightening
Yes.
chapter.
Yeah.
Very enlightening. I'm thinking that God is totally in control and there's nobody else, in there, but this is just like, oh yeah,
What?
oh yeah.
He's totally in control.
Well, I truly believe that. And I truly believe that everything I read in the Bible is for my edification and for trying to live the way He would like me to live, even though I'm such a sinner that I don't live like He would like me to live, but I try my best,
Yeah.
But this was an eye-opener.
Well, and it's gonna get even better.
Great.
Because we'll talk. Next time. I'm not doing outlines because I'm taking
That's
it all
okay.
from the book. You know what
That's
I mean?
okay.
But we get tomorrow. Next week will be very interesting because we talk about things that we've talked about before. So we're talking about the Garden of Eden because
Right.
we're going back to the Garden of Eden. And we've got the two counsels and the one destiny, which we're going to go into a little bit more. But I'll give you this. We'll go into more detail on being imagers of God, probably than we did even when we were in systematic theology. And here's the one that I want you to chew on. When we think of next week being in the image of God, what does that mean? Does that mean the attributes of God?
No.
Okay. Does that mean intelligence? Okay.
We don't even.
Oh yeah, but so what does that mean? Because I'll tell you where he goes with this, which will be slightly uncomfortable, but I think I'll be able to do it. He uses, what's your stance on abortion? Because if you think of the image of God as being able to have intelligence or being able to have the attribute, then all of a sudden this idea of birth at inception, well, hey, until they're living and breathing and all that, they're not in the image of God. Nah, we don't believe that. You know what I mean? So it's like, so what does that image of God mean? And so that'll be the fun conversation for next week, because the Garden of Eden, we've crossed that bridge before. We did the two counsels, one destiny thing, but the image of God is, what does that mean? We say we're made in the image of God, but what does that really mean? So.
And science has actually given us the capability, which it's kind of funny to say last century, mid last century, we didn't have. But science has given us the capability where they could go with that unborn baby and show us physically the progression from month to month. And it's absolutely amazing that people think up to this month we can terminate, because it's not a real person inside of me. And guess what? It's almost a real person from the moment of conception.
But
we get to see that.
You want to call a person, you want to call it, as soon as that divine spark happens, that's God's handiwork, right there in the womb. And that's one of those ones that it's like, how in the world can you sit there? Well, I'm going to get political. I'm going to try not to get political. But how in the world can you sit there and say you're required to wear a mask for a pandemic that basically, you have 99.9995% of surviving, okay? If you take the total population, but yet say it's okay to kill unborn. You can't have those two positions. They're incongruent with each other. If life is this meaningful to you that we have to close schools and we have to do that, then why are you allowing abortions at 9 months or 5 minutes after they're born? So, sorry, that didn't want to get
Yeah,
too political,
yeah.
but I mean, but it goes to that, what we'll talk about next week. We are made in the image of God. What does that mean?
Me,
Because it means
a
a
lot.
lot. And it makes you think about when you see someone sitting there yelling and screaming at somebody, it's like they're still made in the image of God.
They just don't have his love in their heart.
Yep. And so they're filling up the empty space with hate.
Violence and hate.
But they're still made in the image of God.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's where it's like, you want to be mad, and I'll take the word to hate. When you see that violence, you see the senselessness of it.
We're supposed
Well,
to be praying
every
for those
morning
people.
I pray the fruits of the Spirit
Mm.
so that I hope that my heart
Yeah.
will give that out to anybody that meets me.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm a sinner and I don't do it, but I try really, really hard to show those fruits of the Spirit so that someone may just see the light of God.
Well, I think it's also good to remember that Jesus got a belt out, threw over the money changers' tables, and chased everybody out with a belt. So he had righteous indignation, and I think that allows us to have
do
that
that.
too. But it's truth in love.
Right.
We made it. Yay.
Good job.
Thank you.
All right. Would somebody like to pray us out?
Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this lesson. We thank you for your wisdom. We pray that this knowledge will help us in this world and for the world. And Lord, we ask your blessings on Chris and his family. We ask that we learn and observe and give our character better hope in this world. All this, Lord, we ask in your precious name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. See y'all next week.
Okay.